Book Discussions, the Black Educator Compendium. I am so excited to bring you these amazing guests from all over the country today. I am your host, Tasha Jones, and today we have with us, let me first just tell you what Green Book is. Let me tell you, I know you guys are excited because I am. Let me tell you, Green Book Compendium is a Black space free of discomfort, discrimination, segregation, and insult, participating in discussions, forums, collaborative professional developments around topics and interests of our community. And when I say our community, I am saying the Black community. Yes, today our discussion is about the talk, a must-have dialogue to survive and thrive in dual America. Our guest for today is Dr. Tawanda Harris. She is an adjunct professor and a distinguished author. Principal David McGuire and a doctoral candidate is our second guest. Our third guest is Robstar. He is a creative. Our fourth guest is Melvin Murry. He is a special education teacher. And so before I let you view these panelists live, let me just tell you a little bit about them. Dr. Tawanda Harris has been a teacher, a staff developer, and a literacy content specialist and an instructional coach. Currently an instructional leadership coordinator and an adjunct professor in reading and writing in Atlanta, Georgia. She's going to be bringing us almost 20 years of experience, and she is a distinguished author. Our next guest is David McGuire. He was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. He graduated from Central State University. I see you, HBCU. He has received his master's degree in English, and he has received his his bachelor's degree in English and his master's degree in business administration. And he is currently a doctoral candidate. And he is the principal of Tinley Summit Academy in Indianapolis, Indiana. Robstar98 is a whole mood, a whole vibe. He is a musician and technology genius. Robert Hornberger has masterfully weaved theology, art, and music to produce a plethora of creative works to view, listen to, and think about. And finally, Melvin Murry. He is a middle school special education teacher in the Springfield Public School System. He is a part of DESE, that's Department of Education and Elementary and Secondary Education, Inspired Fellows Program, and he serves as a mentor on the journey into education and teaching the JET program. He wants to be identified as a Black gay male. All right, now that is our panel for today. I want everybody to say hello. You guys are there. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Hi.
What's up?
So I'm going to
everyone.
I'm going to individually just say hello to you, and then you can just tell people a little bit more about you and how you identify, and then we'll go into what our discussion is for today. So we'll start with you, beautiful Miss Dr. Tawanda Harris. Who are you? Who are you going to tell our viewing audience and our listening audience you are?
Well, thank you so much for the awesome introduction of me and who I am. One thing that I always like to point out is that I am a parent as well as an educator. It's hard to take your hat off when you're busy advocating for your child, but also making sure that you are giving all of your students the best. So I've had the opportunity, I'm originally from Springfield, Massachusetts, born and raised, graduated from high school, Central High School, and then I went into an HBCU, Clark Atlanta University, and I went into the education program, and I've been here ever since. So I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of schools that serve and support Black and Brown students. So it has been a great experience. I received my master's at Clark Atlanta, my doctorate's at Clark Atlanta, and I am now an adjunct professor at Clark Atlanta, in addition to writing books for teachers around the world.
Thank you so very much. So we have a wealth of information in Dr. Harris, and we are going to call upon that and make sure that we use all of the opulence of knowledge that you have and share with our audience today. Underneath my screen is Robstar. So right after Dr. Harris, go ahead, Robstar, and then we'll go with David and end with Melvin. Rob, you're on mute.
Yep. The technology guru leaves everything on mute. I am Robert Hornberger. I am currently in Indianapolis, Indiana. I have an audio engineering degree from Full Sail University, and I've done everything from touring and production to documentary work and a lot of other things. And so I'm happy to join the conversation today. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that our listening audience and our watching audience is very in tune to the fact that our panelists are available for you as well, right? So if you need somebody to come and talk to you about the books that we have in regards to education, Dr. Tawanda Harris. If you need a documentary, Robstar is available. So as you get to know these people and you listen to their thoughts, they're also going to be available to you. Dr. McGuire, go ahead, introduce yourself.
I like the Dr. McGuire. It's got a nice ring to it. That's coming soon.
Right
but
there, it's right there. It's
right,
there.
gotta claim it. You gotta claim it. Absolutely. So I think one of the ways I introduce myself now is I'm Zuri's daddy. So Zuri is my 1-year-old, and so I'm a father now. So it's a new experience for me. Been an educator my entire life, adult life. But I also like to say that I'm the leader of the realest generation. And so what I mean by that is, it's about time that we educate our children to carry this torch and this mantle. And so what I'm trying to do in the education space as a principal is I'm trying to build up the next generation. Tasha, one thing we share in common is the love for James Baldwin, and I like to infuse that in our students early. And so I'm trying to make sure that I can develop whether our young kings and queens to again carry this mantle, because we're seeing what's happening in society. And so it's time for education to take its rightful throne and to help in society. And so as a principal now, that's kind of how I identify myself. But as a man and a person, I'm Zuri's daddy. And so I love her to death, and she's changed everything about me. So excited for this conversation. And again, just excited to, be in a space with you again, Tasha, because I know where your passion lies. So thanks for the invite.
It's so great to see you again. But it was one thing that you just said before we jump into Melvin, is that I have rarely heard a principal call his students kings and queens, right? And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. We're going to touch back to more of that later. But the principal of Tinley Summit Academy just called his scholars in his building kings and queens, and that he's introducing them to authors like James Baldwin this early. And that's I don't know if y'all caught it, but that'll preach. That'll preach. That will preach. Melvin Murry, go ahead, introduce yourself. Thank you, sir.
So, thank you for allowing me to be part of this. It's quite an honor, and I am in awe of all of you. I came to education later in my career, in my late 40s. I spent the majority of my career working in the retail fashion industry in places like Australia, Europe, and many cities around the US, working for Abercrombie & Fitch, Urban Outfitters, and The Gap. I took a year-long sabbatical in South America, specifically in Brazil, and just to do some soul searching when everything crashed in 2008, and decided that I wanted to come back and educate. I wanted to contribute to the world in a different way. And I thought about where I could do that and live. And so I moved back to Springfield, Massachusetts, where I was born and raised, and hadn't really been here since I went away to graduate school at the University of Virginia in 1988. I have an undergraduate degree from Holy Cross in Worcester. I have an MBA from the University of Virginia, and I just a couple of years ago finished my master's in education from American International College. I love what I do. I love the kids. I don't have kids. I don't plan on having kids, but I get to contribute to my community, and I get to be kept relevant by the kids around me, and they enrich my life as much as hopefully I enrich theirs. So.
Thank you so very much for sharing that. That's one of the reasons why I invited you to the panel. not be, I know that we're talking about the talk and what conversations we have to have with our children in order for them to survive and thrive in this dueling America. But one of the reasons, there are two people who are on the panel who do not have children. And both of those persons, Robstar and Melvin, are equally devoted to uplifting, encouraging, and empowering our children. And I wanted that perspective there, right? Because there are people who don't necessarily have children, but who are fathers to children who don't have fathers who are there. And that perspective needs to be heard, right? That perspective needs to be seen, and that perspective needs to be felt. And I felt that, Melvin. Thank you so very much. We are ready to now jump into our questions. So I am going to put what we have on file and go forward. We are ready. All right, so I want to make sure that everybody is getting a chance to be seen, and let's dive into these questions. One of the reasons that this was so important to me is because of this image right here, right? The image on the screen says, they kill our dads and then make fun of us for not having one. And when we think about that, when we think about our children who are constantly losing fathers, losing uncles, losing brothers at the hands of the police, right? At the hands of the environment, at the hands of not being able to provide for their children, and being placed in this demographic that emasculates them, right? My first question is a quote from Tessanic Coates, who says, the author from Between the Word and Me, he says, here is what I would like for you to know. In America, it is traditional to destroy the Black body. It is heritage. I'm asking you, what are your thoughts when you immediately hear that? And what can you recall about your own childhood as a racialized Black here in America? And what do you say to yourself as a racialized Black and to the people around you in regards to, you have to know that in the back of your mind, that America is here to destroy your body? Like, how do you carry on, and how do you move on a day-to-day basis with that? Anybody can jump in. You know, we are educators, so I can cold call or you could just jump on in.
I can go first. So I think it's impossible to have a conversation about Ta-Nehisi Coates without first having a conversation with Baldwin, about Baldwin. So I was happy when you brought up Baldwin in the introduction, and Dr. McGuire did as well, because if you look at Between the World and Me, and you think about The Fire Next Time, that first letter, written in 1962, is a letter that Baldwin was writing to his nephew, which touches on the themes that Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing to his son in Between the World and Me. In fact, the title of Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, comes directly from that letter. The thing that's so amazing is that the ideas, the thoughts, the sort of warnings, the sort of strategy that he's giving his nephew in 1962 is the same strategy that we are having to give our Black and brown kids 60 years later. It absolutely blows my mind. And so the idea that we have come so far and yet we haven't moved at all is both, it is nothing but frightening to me. What I do as an educator is hopefully give Black and brown boys and girls the understanding of what the road looks like, what the path looks like, so that they hopefully can identify the landmines before they step on them and be able to jump over the hurdles. And none of this was set up by them, and this sort of society was not set up for them, but hopefully I can give them the skills to navigate it. I am beginning to question my own ability to navigate that landscape based on everything that I'm seeing in the last 20 or 30 years. You asked about my own experience. I think that I have experiences in different countries. I have experiences in different cities. And I have experienced being a Black man outside of the African Black American world. And so I know what it looks like not to walk into a room and have your Blackness be the determining factor. Having said that, I also know what it is like to be a Black American in the US. And so what I understand that at any time, I can be seen as having no value. The Black male body in particular, has no value in the US. It just, they tell us, they say that it does, but their actions undermine that at every single turn. And so what I have to do is I have figured out how to walk into rooms and situations that aren't for me and have been able to figure out how to navigate those successfully. And it's those skills I try to give to the kids. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to understand the landscape, and I want them to be able to navigate it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Melvin, you said something about value, and it makes me think, like, in a country that sees my Black skin as their enemy, they'll never see me as their friend, right? I have no value. We all have degrees and skill sets, but we live in a country that doesn't value us for any of those things. None of that means anything, right? Because you can ask the poorest white person, they would rather be poor white than affluent and successful Black, right? And so our kids have to understand that, right? This is a system, and it says it in the quote, right? It's a tradition to destroy the Black body. They built this country on the backs of destroying Black people, right? That's how the essence of our country was built. And it took, every time in history, certain things happened that remind us of that, right? For me, I think about those turning points. The first one for me was 2014, right? I remember watching and seeing the coverage of Ferguson and Mike Brown. And it took me back to college in 2006, where a professor put in my hands the Fire Next Time, right? For the first time, and she introduced me to Baldwin, right? And then, you know, I go on and I graduate college and I get a job and all those things. And then Ferguson happens. And then it snaps me back into reality. And then it happens again now, right? In 2020 with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the list can go on and on and on. But we're now at a crossroad, because now finally, those who profited and benefit from the way America was, the whites, are finally trying to understand the country that we all live in, right? And so we have to be honest. And what I'm trying to do now with my students is we've got to be honest with this America, right? And what America is. And we can't give them the Christopher Columbus and Revolutionary War speech. And we have to go deeper than slavery, right? Because, you know, one of I consider my mentor, Sharif El-Mekki out of Philly, says, slavery is not the start of the Black history, it's the interruption of Black history, right? And so that's the piece that we want to preach to our children. But I mean, the quote says it in, like I said, you know, they built this country on the backs of destroying us. And we have to share that message with our students. Otherwise, we send them in the world unprepared.
I think, you know, when you think about this quote, you have to acknowledge systematic racism. And as you all have said before, how it is the reason why we do the things that we do today, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Think of the way we do school. The way we do school is based on a racist system. So when we're thinking about not allowing our students to think for themselves, and we are teaching them to pass a test, or we're not allowing them to think critically or be advocates, we have to understand that some of our actions and our reactions come from a racist system. And once you acknowledge that piece of it, then you can start that narrative to help our Black and brown students understand, our kings and queens understand that we are not starting from a deficit, but we're actually starting in which they were on top, that they are brilliant, that they are genius. I think of Dr. Goldie Muhammad. She has a book, Cultivating Genius, and she talks about how in a systematic racism and how it affects the way we do school, how we don't allow the brilliance to come out of our students, mainly because we are putting them in a box. So once we acknowledge that piece of it, then we can start to change the system from within. And it may not be that I'm changing all of the educational system. It might simply be, I'm going to start from my class. I'm going to start one student at a time. How am I allowing them to be an advocate for change? How am I allowing them to have a voice when they see injustice? How am I allowing them to be innovators? How am I allowing these opportunities? And that's really where we need to start the story.
Very good. I really appreciated that. Go ahead, Rob.
Man, so many good comments. I can definitely, all of the comments definitely resonate with me in one way or another. I think also there may be a perspective that's worth considering, and that is, number one, like, where's the hate derived from? To understand it. And number two, how is value measured, right? Because indeed, definitely looking at the grand scheme of things, it's very easy to get to the conclusion of the zero value, of my skin. However, in the 21st century, I have been able to make a living. I have been able to complete an education. And I think it's important to look at that, because when you talk to folks who go, well, what's the problem? It doesn't look like the 60s, or we're not in slavery. I want to engage that in a healthy way, right? And so I think the thing to kind of think about maybe is, how has value been marginalized, right? So that we can engage in that conversation. And then also talk about how systemic racism has really become the technology of oppression, right? In the sense that you can give me you guys are all educators, you can give me a standardized test and, and use that as an easy way to dismiss who I am as an individual. And in my heritage, right, I have learned, or I am learning, to value every aspect of it. And so even the hate that has been placed upon me, or the frustration or racism, right? I feel like, our path as those of African descent is really begging humanity a bigger question. And it really is the question of value, right? Because if it's not, only African Americans, then it's some other racial group, or it's some other category that allows me to oppress you, whether it's sexual preference or gender, right? It's always something else. So I just offer those thoughts in trying to further the conversation, maybe as tools to engage others.
That's interesting to me, because it started, and it seems like it's ending right back at James Baldwin, right? Right, when we go back to the grammar thing, when we're thinking about how value is measured, let's go back to The Fire Next Time. Remember, The Fire Next Time was written 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, right? That's the start of the book. That's the start of it. This is to James on the 100th anniversary of James, my namesake, the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, we talking about 100 years after Lincoln had signed the Emancipation, or after he, wrote it, signed it in 63. So it was written in 62, signed in 63. And 100 years after that. And then another 60 years after that, you have Ta-Nehisi Coates coming back with the same message in Between the World and Me, right? And so if you're talking about 162 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, look at the value that is being placed on the people that we're talking about, which is ourselves, right?
I think that,
Go ahead.
yeah, I think the challenge is to figure out how we define value. Like, what is value something that is put upon us, that is decided by external forces, or is value something that comes from within? I think that we would do ourselves a disservice to not realize that we live in a consumer-based economy, where I think that our kids sometimes associate value with possessions and not with knowledge. I also think that as a Black American culture, as a Black American race, we have had value put upon us in so many different ways that we struggle to figure out what our true value is. When we first came to this country, our value was decided by our ability to produce. And that value was decided by whomever sold us or bought us or passed us along in some sort of bizarre inheritance, or needed money for the next crop. That value was put upon us. I think as we have been, and after that, I think that, and I'm just sort of, I have no sort of academic knowledge to sort of base this on, but it makes sense that if your value in the early 1800s or the 1619 from emancipation was decided by who owned you, and then your value was no longer decided by that through emancipation, how do you define your value? And the things that you associate with value, you don't have access to. You don't have access to education. You don't have access to land. You don't have access to the economy. All the things that, if you look around at the white majority, well, the white people in the country at that particular time, that was their value. And we didn't have the value of family, because family didn't exist, because family was an idea that could be sort of your family could be taken away from you. Mothers sold, children sold, parents, families broken up. So there was no sense of value, and I think we've been struggling with that ever since.
Interesting to me that you said that the children today feel like value is placed in materials, and then and being brought to America and enslaved, right? Being brought to America and enslaved, we were only looked at as materials. We were never looked at as human, right? That was the whole reasoning for the us understanding our place, right? We were always cargo. We were the first insurance, right? That's how people got paid for insurance. If they order 1,500 bodies and only got 900, then you owe me some money, right? Because I ordered 1,500 bodies, right? We've always been considered cargo according to them, right? What we have inherently said to our children is that you are a king inherently. Whatever they do to you, never forget your kingdom. Always keep your head up. Always know exactly where you came from. Teach yourself that you are the best, that you are great, that you can get this done beyond whatever anybody else imposes on you, right? Understand that I have brought you into this world, and that nothing you do can take you out of it, except you not understanding that you are a king or a queen, right? And that you have to understand that capacity. So this is an interesting conversation within the realm of the question itself.
Yeah, I think it's really important, because I think what's happening right now is it's really and I know that I say this often, but it's a duality, right? Like, at the same time you have protesters, right? You have people who are looting, right? And like a young lady who was in the Facebook thing that kind of went viral, she goes, there are definitely people who are protesting for civil rights, right? But at the same time, there are also people who go, this is my opportunity to get that thing that I consider of value, and I might not ever have another chance, right? That's why somebody goes and loots, right? And, so, yeah, the work of education is super important, because really, you know, I think the biggest myth or the biggest lie is that the value system that was placed upon you doesn't matter at all. It doesn't mean anything at all outside of operating in this societal system. And there are challenges that come with that, but I think you live, you move, you work differently when you understand that, okay, I'm going to play that game so that I can get this job or get this degree, versus this degree is me, this car is me, these shoes that I'm wearing, this is me, right? And you know, and I know he's not a Black poet, but but it's so it's like, you know, the Shakespeare, the eternal question, to be or not to be. You know, who are you? You know, where are we going? Huh?
People question if people Black.
We can question that. We can
question if people a Black woman.
But you know, y'all was Coates and Baldwin. You know what I mean? So I'm throwing out Shakespeare there, and that's debatable.
I think it goes back to acknowledging how systematic racism has affected, you have wealth, you talk about the economy, how redlining, and after slavery and all of these things, we weren't allowed to get homes. We weren't allowed to live in certain neighborhoods. And so when we were talking about generational wealth, we were always starting in the negative, because anything we had, it was taken away. Even when slavery ended and it was time for us to get our land or what have you, it was said, I'm sorry, they don't know how to handle the land. Well, we were handling the land the entire time. And so we literally were starting with absolutely nothing. And then if you fast forward to when we owned our property, we couldn't own our property. If we moved into areas in which they were predominantly white, real estate agents would lose their license. And so you have all of these decisions that were being made. And so all of the jobs, where were they were put in the suburbs. Well, they didn't have a transit system to get to, public transportation couldn't get our families there. So there are all of these reasons as to where we are today. And so when you think about the idea of value, I agree with what you all are saying, how, you know, we've been unfortunately brainwashed to think, when I have a car, that is my value. When I have these sneakers, that is my value, because we know that we've had to fight. And so someone mentioned earlier about the degrees. I know for me as a Black person, yes, I have a lot of degrees, but my parents didn't pay for my college education. So I have a lot of degrees and a lot of debt. And so what does that do for me as a Black person in America? It automatically puts me in a position to where I don't come out on top. I have to still fight to get out of debt. So yes, I have all of these opportunities, but imagine if I didn't have hundreds of $1,000s in student loans and my parents could pay for those things, then I could come out on top. So when our children see the quick fixes, the rappers getting this, and the athletes getting $1 million contract and all of those things, they're trying to get that quick fix, because we know that in our family, typically a Black family doesn't have that generational wealth to go ahead and set us up for success, like predominantly with like white families.
Yeah, that's true. Right? We was left out of the GI Bill. We were left out of things of that nature. So that's understood, which leads us right to the next question, right? And I want you to think about this as it relates to the children. We know the reality of the Black community is we can do 100% of everything that the officer says and still get killed, right? Is this the reality of being Black in America? And then what do we do for our children who feel like this is the reality?
I say hell yeah. I mean, because think about it. You could do nothing, get shot, right, in the back. Jacob Blake. You could be by yourself and get shot, Tamir Rice, a child. You could be in your bed sleep, get shot, Breonna Taylor. You could beg for your life, George Floyd and get killed, right? It doesn't matter what.
You can be in your own apartment and the police break in.
Right? You could be playing with your nephew, a video game. And so we can't win, right? You name an example of something right, wrong, doing nothing, sleep, and they're killing us. But again, it goes back to what I said. That because that's the reality, we cannot have our kids operating. Should we teach our kids to respect the authority? Yeah, but that don't do you no good either. You do everything you're supposed to do. You reach for your driver's license, they shoot you, right? But 17-year-old white kid with a long tail rifle and a gloves can walk through a protest and nobody stop him. And then when they do stop him, they let him go and then they arrest him later. Let Kyle Rittenhouse, whatever house, been black. Let that been Marcus Jackson. Marcus Jackson would have been shot dead live on CNN. And nobody would have said a thing, right? So again, but what we have to do for our children is we cannot hide it from them. I think George Floyd in the summer and the protests of 2020 saw a lot of educators where they no longer hid what America was to their kids. And it's about time. Because I think we all hid Ferguson, right? We touched on it a little bit and it went away. I don't think we really touched on Trayvon Martin outside of we saw folks wearing hoodies. This is the first time that I think educators finally said enough is enough. We gotta tell our kids the truth about the America they live in. Otherwise, we set them up and they go to failure. Because it used to be when you get pulled over by an officer, put your hands where they can see you, they won't kill you. Hell, Philando Castile did everything he was supposed to do, and they still shot him in front of his kids, right? So that's our space. And they say, well, what are you supposed to do about it? Hell, I don't know. Change the skin color. That's the only thing I can think of that keep you alive. So, but we just have to be honest with our kids.
But I feel like Black parents and Black people have always been having the talk or being honest with their kids. We've always been communicating how to navigate those particular situations. I think what feels so different about this particular set of circumstances is that there was nothing else for us to do. And when I say us, I mean America as a whole. So what you saw, if this had happened and it was just us paying attention to it, no one would be having this conversation. But because white people are finally paying attention to it, because white educators and white corporations and white suburban moms and white suburban dads with leaf blowers are finally paying attention to it, America has decided that it is important enough. It is when white people adopt, an issue or come to the aid, all of a sudden they think it's finally important enough. And I agree. It is, I don't know what to tell these kids anymore. I don't know, but I'm hoping, but by the folding in of white people into the conversation, that it will change because they hold the power structure and they have the final ability to change it. We have, unfortunately, our power is so limited in these situations. Like, again, we've been talking about this since 1619. This is not a new conversation. It's 400 plus years. We've been marching in the streets for a long time. But we finally have white and non-Black colleagues and allies along, and I think the conversation is changing.
I think as a Black parent, my husband and I, we have two boys and a girl, 3 children in total. Our oldest is a freshman. I keep wanting to go back to high school. He is a freshman in college, and then we have a high schooler, a 9th grader. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is this whole idea of fear. And we want to make sure that we acknowledge the wrongdoing and the injustice that is the reality. However, we also put fire behind them to advocate when no one else is advocating. And that's a scary thing as a parent. So what we're essentially saying, you need to be able to stand up for what is right, and that may cost you your life. But if that is the case, I would rather you go down as a hero than as a coward. And I think that the reality of what we are experiencing as in a nation, as well as in education, is that we have white educators that are quiet. We have white colleagues that are quiet, and quiet is loud. And we have to make sure that when we are standing for whatever it is that we're standing up for, that we are vocal about it. And so if you go to any of my social media pages, I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel. I'm not coming from an angry Black woman standpoint. I am coming from what I know to be true, that I am instilling, the things that I'm instilling in my children, to be able to go into spaces in which you are the minority and still be comfortable with who you are. I have a daughter. She was in a space in which she was the only Black child in the classroom. And she would come home and say, I want my hair straightened like my classmates. And I would intentionally braid her hair. I would intentionally twist her hair out. I would intentionally do all of these things, because what I needed to tell her is you need to get them to want to do their hair like you. And so that is one of the things that as a parent, that we have to have the courage to say, yes, this is the reality, but I want you to advocate against the injustice that is happening in the world.
That's powerful, sis. That is powerful, right? Because it's a couple of things. That quiet is loud, right? Like you being silent at our jobs, and you being silent at lunch and not saying anything is telling me a lot. It's telling me about whose side you're really on, and you are a part of the group that wants to dehumanize who I am as a person, and who I am and who we are as a people. And it always, and in some sense, it goes back to that Willie Lynch theory, right? Willie Lynch said, oh, you got to break the Negro break the Negro man in front of the woman, and then she will forever teach the Negro man how to be docile. She will forever teach the Negro man how to eat out of your hand. But what you just said is, no, I don't teach that. If you have to die because you have to stand in your Blackness, die on, right? And that's powerful, sis. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just like to echo that. I maybe it's the creative in me. I have a lot of optimism. Two things. I feel like our youth are really, 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 really smart, right? And I feel like DNA is doing something with them when they come out, that they just move differently. Even though I don't have children myself, I'm around my nieces and nephews, and in creative work, I also work with students a lot. And they think differently, they move different. I think the focus, the biggest thing that we can do is, kind of piggybacking off the first question, is really instill value in them, number one, and then be transparent with them about the reality. Daddy Pope, Scandal was like, hey, what have I always told you? Talking to Olivia, and she said, I gotta be twice as good to get just as far. Right? And even though it's a fictional character, that statement rang true to me, because once you know the game, I feel like you play it in a different way, and I think some of us, as we were raised, we didn't realize the seriousness of the game, because maybe the adults in our lives were teaching us the political correct thing to do, and the sophisticated Black thing to do, right? Like, you can do this and get a good education, but just always know that your seat is here and this is the way you should behave. Because they're going to face situations that we don't know, we haven't seen yet, right? The only way to prepare them for that is for them to have really intrinsic value overall.
It's interesting. It leads us right into W.E.B. Du Bois, who said double consciousness is a concept in social philosophy referring to originally to a source of inward two-ness, right? Where you have to be two people in one, experienced by African Americans because of their racialized oppression and disvaluation in a white dominated society. The question is, do we owe it to our children? Do we do our children a disservice by not preparing them to move, act, and be pertinent in double consciousness? Do we do them a disservice if we don't teach them how to code switch? Do we do them a disservice if we don't teach them about the toolness that they have to be? Or are we doing a disservice by teaching them how to code switch? Which way do you stand?
Listen, I think Dr. Harris, she said it, right? If, you know, when she talked about that, I'd rather you die a hero, you know, than live as a coward, right? I think times has changed. I remember growing up, you know, maybe late high school, this theory of the boys and the double consciousness and the talented 10th was the way to be, because what I think it did then was it taught you to tone down your blackness, right? Where I think what this quote is saying is, do we do us kids a disservice by teaching them double consciousness? Yeah, because basically it's saying, hey, you need to code switch. But hey, I don't see these white officers code switching. They're the same racist white officers, you know, what it is. And I think Thurgood Marshall, I think it was Thurgood Marshall that said, the Ku Klux Klan don't wear the sheets no more because the sheets are expensive, right? So they're still in the drawer, right? That white coat is still in the drawer in the closet, right? They're not code switching. You know, white parents aren't teaching their kids to code switch. Why do we have to teach our kids to operate in a space? No, be your 100% authentic black self. That includes your black name, your black hair, and your black skin, and your black walk, and your black talk. Right. And if they don't like it, then so be it. So I think, you know, not to knock the boys, but I think everything that's happening is from when we were trying to teach our children to code switch. And what has it gotten us? Nowhere. So no, the hell with it. Be your black self, right? So I think it does, to answer your question, simply to say, I think it does our children a disservice by preparing them to operate in this America by undermining and toning down who they are.
I feel like what Du Bois was saying, which I think was appropriate for that particular time, there is a difference between code switching and subjugating oneself. And to recognize when you have to adjust or change how you are in, or morph into a particular setting, is different than subjugating yourself and denying who you are in those settings. So for instance, if I go to, you know, a teacher parent conference, I'm a different person than if I am standing in front of a room full of 7th grade boys, right? Or if I am hanging with my brother. I am adjusting for the circumstance, but I am always authentically myself. I think when in the 60s, certainly when my parents were sort of coming into sort of young adulthood and finding themselves, I think civil rights and blackness was new. I feel like it's something that is constantly morphing, and as it morphs, it becomes more authentic. What I see kids doing now is feeling comfortable with being who they are, and they're forcing a conversation in white culture, and white culture needs to recognize and support black culture. This isn't about black culture always recognizing white culture. White culture needs to come to terms with the fact that it has been appropriating and repackaging black culture for the last 400 years. It is our music, it is our food, it is our culture that they have taken and repackaged and repurposed. I see black kids, I see, you know, the sort of, certainly everyone on this thing is probably younger than I am, but I see you guys saying, I am going to authentically be myself, and I'm going to ask you or tell you that you need to deal with that, right? I'm not going to subjugate myself. I may change the way that I talk or the way I interact based on specific situations, but that doesn't mean that I'm subjugating myself. That doesn't mean that I'm in any way inauthentic.
I think the language of change is what's like it sits a little different, right? Like you don't necessarily have to change who you are. You're just a nuanced person. You're not a linear person, right? Like, so it's me bringing my whole self into this realm and saying that the part of me that will come dressed for a basketball game is not coming to a business meeting, right? But both of them are still me. I still play basketball and I still go to a business meeting. Right, go ahead, Dr.
I think we have to be careful with this whole idea of code switching, because essentially, like David mentioned earlier, if I can't bring my whole self to a space, then I don't need to be in that space. That's a hard decision to make, because what you are essentially saying is only bring part of you to this space, because that is the only part that I will accept. And when I start to make adjustments based on my space, I become an assimilator. So I assimilate into what the norm is, but who makes the norm?
Exactly.
It's a racist system. You know, I keep going back to who made what value is, who established the definition of value, who established the definition of success. It wasn't us. And so we have to be very careful when we try to fit in with the Joneses, is because we sometimes put ourself and our whole being to the side. In education, we have to make sure that our curriculum, that our strategies, that our learning experience, that they accept our whole student population. I don't care who you are. Once you walk through my doors, you are valued, you are heard. But I can't just say that. I have to show it. And I show it through my opportunities. I show it through my actions. I show it through the time that I'm spending with each and every student. I think of Sarah Ahmed's work. She has a book called Be the Change. She does a lot of work around identity. And identity for us, we don't always acknowledge students' identities because we become so brainwashed into who the world says we are. But if we understood truly who we were and, you know, really lived out who exactly we were and who we were meant to be, oh my goodness, the world couldn't stop us. But because our experiences aren't welcome into a space, our hair, I mean, you have jobs that say, no, you can't wear braids into that space. And you think of grammar, the way that grammar is being taught, your subject and verbs have to line up. Well, sometimes my subject and my verbs won't line up. And I still am intelligent. I still bring brilliance in the room. And so we just have to be careful of the subconscious, the subliminal messages that we're sending to our youth when we say code switch. Well, why are you code switching? Because all of you will be valued in any space.
That reminds me of Dr. Bettina Love's work, who says, me as a hip hop lover, I am academic, and I can bring that part of my identity into the table, and it can be studied, and I can study in a bigger sense, you know, in a bigger sense, and say that the way I speak, the way I walk, the way I move, how I cipher, it's all academic, and it's a part of my identity, and it is worthy to be studied, and I am worthy to be here. That's good stuff.
Yeah, I get hung up on that term code switch. I don't think that it is, I think that it's a problematic term.
Yeah, I had a professor tell me that yesterday when I tried to defend a paper, and he said, I understand code switching, and I said, I'm not code switching, and I don't even think you deserve, I mean, like, why would I have to code switch for you? Right, like, I mean that. Like, who are you that I should have to change? Right? It takes me back to Toni Morrison to say, if you think it, she said very clearly, and she said it with this beautiful tone. That's why I love Toni Morrison and Murry Evans, right? They speak so soft and so clear that it makes you have to lean in to listen. And she said, if you can only be tall because someone else is kneeling, what does that say about you? Right? And that's powerful. Here we go. I think this is one of the last questions. How do we get our children to trust themselves and their actions in this space, right? So if we tell our children, number one, you're safe to be who you are. Number two, you don't have to code switch. Number three, you do everything right and they still kill you, right? This is my son said this to me so clearly. I said, my son just started driving. He just got a car. And we put all of the materials, his license, everything into a plastic container, and it has magnets in it. So if he ever gets pulled over, he's just supposed to put all of that plastic on the top of his car and keep his hands on his wheel, right? And that's it, right? That's it. Everything you need is on the top of this car. I'm gonna keep my hands where you can see them, right? And I said, Shalom, I don't want you to go out. My son's name is Peace. His name means peace. And I said, Shalom, I don't want you to go out after a certain time. And he said, Mama, we can't change the fact that when we called them master, they still hung us. You're gonna have to trust me, right? And I think this is it, right? This is, how do we get our children to trust themselves? How do we get parents to trust their children and their actions, that know that whatever we put in them, they have got it and they can maneuver. Anybody can take the question.
I feel that trust comes with knowledge, right? An understanding of who you are, and an understanding, again, going back to what we started this conversation off with, this value, understanding your true value, and believing in yourself. And I think that we as educators have to do that. I think we spend a lot of time schooling kids and not necessarily educating them. Spend a bit more time educating our kids.
That's a quotable.
Dr. Goldie, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say, Tasha, I think you said it, right? The comment that your son said to you means that you and his dad have instilled things over the years about the reality that he lives in. And what he did to you was just regurgitate everything that you taught him in a manner. And I think when we get our kids to that point, when they say something to us that says, okay, right, you got it. I think that's what we have to do. How do we get them? We have to continue year after year, right? Instilling in them the right things. So when I think about my own space, right? When my scholars walk into the school, I call them kings and queens because I tell them the moment you walk into this door, you're about to sit amongst your throne. This school and this building, that classroom, that desk and that seat is your throne. You are the king and queen of this space. And we call them that in kindergarten where they don't understand it. We call them that in first grade where they don't understand it. Then in second grade, then in third grade, it clicks, right? Fourth and fifth grade, now in sixth grade, that's why they walk around with their chest held high. That's why they do challenge certain things, because it's like, well, hold on. Because my principal told me when I was 5, I was a king and a queen. This is my school. This is my space, right? But it's the moment they regurgitate it back to you. And I think your son did that for you when you said, you're right, I have to trust you.
Yes, man, that's beautiful. Go ahead, anybody? Go ahead, Dr. Harris.
And I think also we have to remember that we are all learners. Sometimes we believe as the adults that when we walk into a space, I am giving you knowledge. I am giving you your education. I'm not giving you anything. I'm providing a space for you to just soar. That is what you do as a parent, and that is what you do as an educator. And so once we understand that our role in our children's lives, whether it be students or our children, is to come alongside them and learn with them. Dr. Goldie Muhammad says it's important that when we go to allow our students or provide learning experiences for our students, that we make sure that we understand or ask ourselves, what am I learning from this? Or what did I learn from this? If I am teaching a lesson, or if I am providing a learning experience for my students and I walk away not knowing anything more, then I was just the disseminator of information. And that didn't benefit anyone. And so we have to keep that mindset of constantly growing, constantly learning, so that when your son has to make a decision for himself, then he is able to say, no, I've been prepared, like you said, David. And the same thing with my sons. I mean, my oldest, I'm a mom, and I'll tell you, my husband, he's from California. He is a California man, very calm, just very, he loves the beach, just very relaxed. Me, I'm from Massachusetts. So I am, okay, this is what we have to do. And we balance each other, but our parenting, we have a middle ground. But when I think of my oldest son, I'm the one that says, okay, I need you to call me at this time. I need you to do all of these things. But what I'm about to say is not, I'm not saying it as a way of bragging, but I'm saying it as a way of trusting. This is my oldest son. He went into a space in which he was the minority. He didn't do well. It was hard for us to make the decision to take him out of that space. We put him in another space in which there were more Black and brown students with him. And then he became a part of the Harvard Diversity Project, in which they made world history. All of that, my son walked on in these programs, and he was valued. He was loved. He was allowed to bring his whole self to this place. And because we just let him be, he made international history. He has over $200,000 in a college in which his previous school said, oh no, California schools, you probably won't get in. But he has a full 4-year scholarship. And he has all of these things that he's able to bring in. And yes, I would love to say because he's my son. No, that's not why. It was because there have been spaces that he has been allowed to bring his whole self to, and to make decisions and to advocate for himself. Now, had I kept him in his old school in which he was told to just listen and get the information, he wouldn't be the son that I see today. So we just have to be mindful when we are putting or providing spaces for our students that we are allowing them to bring their whole selves to that space, so that when they go out into the world, they can be change makers for everyone.
That's good. That's good.
I think that was really good that you mentioned that, because what your son did also has is a resource where he knows, he's aware, Dr. Harris, that he can go out into the world and deal with a situation. I mean, I don't want to pixel pick or nitpick the situations, because each of these violent situations and these murders and any other situation that we experience on different levels every day are all wrong. But I think what our children do need is to know that when they do encounter those spaces, they can recognize that it's an unhealthy space and navigate through that situation in a healthy way, so they can get back to a place of refuge where they are valued and they know. Oftentimes, what you end up witnessing is kind of a calamity of crisis, if you will, where the stress has gotten so to a huge point, and the people responsible are not. They aren't equipped. They have their own stress that they're dealing with. They have their own mental illness that they're dealing with. And so it plays out in these horrific dramas, right? But if a child knows that, okay, this is a moment, I can put my magnet box, which is a great idea, Dr. Jones. I can put my magnet, I'm getting me a magnet box. I can put my magnet box on the car, and I can sit here silently. And I have been pulled over, I counted one day, over 45 times. I lived in a white neighborhood, when I thought I was grown and I wanted to live on the nicer side of town. And, but it was only the piece that my father gave me that let me know, okay, this is a moment. I can respond and not have to respond in anger. And I don't have to be frustrated. And I don't have to take their insult and bring the energy that they're bringing to me. because I have to be better than they are to survive this situation so that I can affect change later on. And I think that may be one of the tools that we can do as we instill value and provide safe spaces for our youth.
With that being said, this is the for real last question. If we do everything that we just talked about, if we teach our children how to have their value, if we teach our children how to bring everything, their whole selves into a space, if we teach our children, there is no code switch. You're 100% yourself and you bring 100% of yourself into the space. If we teach our children that we trust them and that you know how to respond and act, then will America be ready for our children? Will this America be ready for our children?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, on the technology side, I'm super excited because I can provide a good or a service and you don't have to know anything about my ethnicity to engage with me. And we're moving to a global economy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and the arc of justice is bending in our favor, you know. And the tools that are just coming online are just like they're super amazing, man. And I'm excited like to be able to have this seat and judge. And America is not ready. They will benefit, but we're going to become a better country for it overall. You know, just even anecdotally, there's even just there's more interracial marriages and things like that happening. So our dynamics, our population is changing. So I'm hopeful.
If we do what you just said, I think we won't have to worry about if this America is ready for our children, because America will be different. So I'm like, I'm optimistic about that. If we do what you just said, if we do that, we won't even have to worry about it, because I think America will be different. Because everything that Rob said and you stated, this will be a different country. But the question is, will America be ready, but those that want the old America, will they be ready?
Yeah.
I'll throw this out there too, and this is a thing that I think about a lot, is what else do we have to sacrifice to get there? That worries me. Is it my life? Is it my brother's life? Is it my father's life? You know, how many more protests do we have to have? You know, how many more text messages or
hashtags,
Instagram? Yeah, how many hashtags do I have to go through? Because it hurts. It hurts. I'm calibrating how much time from seeing something like that now with myself does it take me to feel normal again? Does it take me to feel okay? Because I can quantifiably measure how my life has changed since 2014, 2015. I know I can write down, I have in my journal when certain things happened and how it affected me in a different way.
Yeah.
I think kind of going back to what you said earlier, Rob, you said, you know, you're hopeful. And I think that when we as a people lose hope, then we become unmotivated to even care. And I honestly, I don't believe that racism will ever end. I would like to say, I always say in my Disney world, it would end, but it's really not going to end. But back to my earlier point, making change one person at a time, because that's all I have. All I have is my platform. All I have is my family. All I have are my friends, my friends' friends, my friends' families, all of those opportunities that I have to speak and to hear stories of others and allow them to hear our stories, then change could happen. You know, I mean, I think of how many conversations that I have had, and courageous conversations, I will say, that I have had to have in very white spaces, that I probably, if we weren't in quarantine, I would have just said, you know, it is what it is. You feel what you feel, and I'm going to keep it moving. But where are we going? We're here. We're Zooming. We're doing everything. And so we have to acknowledge it. Even as a person of color, I have to acknowledge how I feel and how I've been internalizing racism against me, how my children, how many talks at the dinner table we have been having. So all that to say, we just have to remain hopeful, and that in itself will help us to continue to have the conversations with whoever it is we need to have a conversation with, and be quiet for whoever it is that we need to be quiet, because everyone, as it was said earlier, everyone is not ready. David's point, everyone is not ready for a change. But if we do all of these things, they don't have to be ready. It is what it is.
It's what it is. Ain't that it? Ain't that it?
I think America will never be a utopia. It's never going to be a utopia for people who look like us. But when I think about the world that I navigate through now, as compared to the world that my parents navigated through, as compared to the world that their parents navigated through, I am hopeful, because what I see is change. And I know it's often said, I am my parents' dream. I have 3 graduate degrees. I'm college educated. I am successful. And I measure that success that is my internal gauge of what success looks like. I have had access to things that they never could have had access to. And so what I see is the arc of the US moves towards the utopia, which is something that it will probably never get. I'm also incredibly hopeful that by the year, I think it's 2045, America will be majority brown and black, right? It is just the fact of, you know, how races and people are intermingling, and we live in a global society. And so the power structure in America that had built America and created those systems will have to give in to that fact, right? And so the America that we navigate through today, like it was different than my parents and their parents, it will be different for our kids. It will be different for the kids who I'm standing up in front of every single day and trying to educate, and not just school. So I'm incredibly, incredibly hopeful.
Well, we've come to the end of our hour. I want to thank you for being present. I want to thank you for lending your voice, your words, and your wisdom. And I'm just going to go one quick time around and ask you to give me your last word. What is the last word? What do you want to say? What do you want to leave to the people? And if you have any books or anything that you want to have people read, go ahead and put that in the chat now, and I'll make sure that I'll place it underneath. But I just want to give this time to you and tell me, what is your last word? What do you want to say to the people? And since I started with Dr. Harris in the beginning, we'll end with you, Queen, and we'll start the other way around. So Melvin, you were first.
Oh yeah.
Nope.
Note everything. I want to say give. Recognize the benefits that other people have sacrificed, that have allowed you to achieve. Give, return to the community, and love unselfishly. Love like you love generously.
I like that. Love generously. Robstar, it's on you, then David, and then Dr. Harris.
I just say, man, go within, and find out who you are as a person. You know, ask yourself a lot of questions. What I really believe is that our struggle as Black folk is going to raise the consciousness of the entire world, right? Because it's one thing to ask if you do racist things. It's another thing to ask if you are a racist. And so I want to recommend the book How to Be an Anti-Racist by Imran Kendi. That's Kendi. It's an awesome book. And I think that's what we all need to do.
Yeah, I got a couple of things. So I think the first I'm gonna say to the Black people that watch this, love and appreciate your capital B Black self. And I said capital B because Black is with a capital B. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna also say to the educators, Robstar mentioned that book, but here's what I can say. The most anti-racist thing you can do is teach a Black kid how to read. And so I want the educators that listen and watch this and share this, that is the most anti-racist thing you can do. Black, white educators is to make sure a Black kid can read. Because Julian Bond said, violence is a Black kid going to school for 12 years and getting 6 years worth of education.
So I got to come behind that, David. Thank you so much.
I just want to let that marinate first.
I'm still trying to process that.
Well, let that simmer.
Yes, that was good. There are a couple of books that I definitely recommend. One from Dr. Kendi. It's actually stamped. He has stamped from the beginning, but Jason Reynolds they came together and rewrote it. And a friend of mine did the official study guide for it. And so if you have not heard the audio book and you are an educator, do yourself a favor and get the audio book. And of course, support by buying the book as well. But there is a study guide for you to start to have those anti-racist conversations in the classroom. It was written specifically for young adults. I keep going back to, if we don't acknowledge that systematic racism is real, then we are doing everyone a disservice. There's another book, it's entitled Be the Change by Sarah Ahmed. She does a lot of work around identity, making sure that we acknowledge all students' identities and what they bring to the table. I don't care what it is, whatever their experience is, that they're all valued. And lastly, I've been quoting Dr. Gholdy Muhammad throughout this. She is out of Atlanta. She teaches at Georgia State, but she has a book entitled Cultivating Genius. And she talks about her literacy framework and the way that pre-slavery, post-slavery, the way that the Black community, when we're talking about freedom schools, how the Black community did teach students to read, and it wasn't it wasn't the process of teaching in isolation, but it was for a reason. And so, to David, to your point, definitely making sure our Black and brown students can read, but empowering them as to what it is that they are reading, to making sure that we are teaching them this so that you can go out and make change, that you can speak against injustice, that you can advocate for a better America. No, we're not going to get it perfect. I think, we'll keep fighting to the day that we die, but at least you are fighting and you're not rolling over and letting this happen to you. The last thing that I'll say is to make sure that we as Black and brown individuals, educators, parents, what have you, that we are having the courageous conversations, but in a loving way. The only way that we can make change is that we first have to be patient with having the conversation with others that don't understand. I've had so many conversations with those that are really trying, but they haven't, they don't even know where to start. And so I have to kind of swallow my pride and say, well, you should have known, and you know, if this happened to you, this is how you should react. Well, I keep saying it is what it is, but if I can be that voice to share my experience, I make sure I take advantage of sharing my experience. I have had individuals in tears, crying, and I feel bad because I'm thinking, what? This is my everyday. And they really don't understand the impact that it has on us. And the last thing, pull away and rest when you need to rest. As Black and brown individuals, this is trauma. We experience, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. We wake up and the same thing over and over and over again. And sometimes, you know, we don't take care of ourselves, and just being able to pull away and appreciate ourselves, appreciate what we bring to situations, just appreciate our value, not defined by anyone else, but how we have, as Melvin, you said earlier, how we have defined it for ourselves. So that is all that I have as last word.
Harris, I will be remiss if I didn't allow you to share the title of your book and your work. You have named off 3-4 authors, and you along with Dr. Muhammad, right? You along with Dr. Kennedy have something that can be brought to the table. Even now, our school is using Heinemann published works, and your work is also published through Heinemann. So share with us what book you have, please, so universities and school systems and districts can buy your book just like they buy Lucy Calkins and everything else. Come on, sis.
Definitely. And I would like to definitely give honor to a mentor who passed away in the process of me publishing my book, Roz Linder. She was like a big sister to me, but she was the very reason that I am here today to say that I published the book. She was an author with Heinemann, and what she always said is, I'm going to do for you what no one else would do for me. And, you know, oftentimes just we as Black people, we don't celebrate and support each other. And it's kind of like the crabs in the barrel mentality. And we think there's only one spot at the top. But our brilliance can light up an entire room. It can change organizations. It can change countries. But if we keep that mentality, then we're pushing each other down as we go up. So I didn't mean to chase that rabbit, but Roz Linder is definitely missed, and she, you know, is in my heart all of the time. But the name of my book is The Right Tools, and it was one of the hardest things that I ever had to write. Yes, I wrote a dissertation, but it paled in comparison because this was something that I wrote from my personal experience as a classroom teacher. When you're writing a dissertation, you're writing someone else's work. You're critiquing someone else's work. My professor said, no one cares what you think. You're not a doctor yet. So as I'm writing, I'm quoting others. But writing this book, I had to deal with some of the frustrations that I had as a first-year teacher. So The Right Tools is really a book that guides educators on how to evaluate, how to vet resources so that all students in your classroom are able to get a quality education, and not to take a curriculum, a packaged curriculum, teach that packaged curriculum and never allow our students to see themselves in that curriculum. So a lot of spaces that I go into, I am one of the only Black females in this. Education is made up, I think last time I checked, about 75 to 80% of white women. So imagine what the publishing world is. I think when I wrote my book, I was one of 3 Blacks. 3. So it's not that we don't have the brilliance to do it. It's just that we aren't given the access and the opportunities to do it. So all that to say, I did, I know you said you'll put in the notes. I have my social media, Twitter. I'm very active on all of my social media platforms. And so a lot of the pieces from my books, the themes from my books and free resources for educators, I make sure that I put them on every single social media platform that I have.
So I'll make sure that that's there with McGuire, Dr. McGuire, we're speaking that into existence. Robstar, Melvin, and Dr. Harris, I am going to leave you with my final words. My final words are always put into the atmosphere where you are going so you can catch your dreams and live them, right? That is the first thing. The second thing I am going to say is be your whole self, be your full self, and love every part of it. Every part of it. I am buku black, and I love being buku black. I love it. Buku black. And so finally, the thing I'm going to say is that I am pushing my dreams out there. This is the next published work that I want to be published, is that when you are learning yourself, learn where you came from. And so I have a poem called Pyramids, Plantations, Projects, and Penitentiaries. And it simply says this: we went from pyramids to plantations, to projects, to penitentiaries. And you think America got love for we? We went from pyramids to plantations, to projects, to penitentiaries, to poplar trees. And you think America want to see us free? Yeah, so I think that is my next work that I want to get published. Hint, hint, Dr. Harris, do for me. No, no, but yes, I just want to thank y'all for being here. This has been great. You guys are amazing. I'm going to put this down in the poster, and we're going to share it with the people. And make sure y'all tune in next.
One thing before we go,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to look right into the camera when I say this.
Do it.
Vote.
Woo!
Everybody
yeah.
on this needs to vote.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Was 18 years old and not registered, drag them, go to vote.saveamerica or vote.org and register, vote right into the camera.
Right into the camera. And this has been a tough week for us. We lost our dear leader in regards to fiction and movies. We lost Chadwick. And so I'm going to leave us with Wakanda forever. Wakanda forever.
Forever, baby.
Forever. Thank y'all.